Good morning, good afternoon, and thank you for your patience. We will now start the session. And so I am pleased to welcome you to one more of our gift webinar Wednesdays. The Global Initiative for Fiscal Transparency with this webinar series is seeking to offer learning opportunities for its members as well as for the fiscal transparency community at large through exploring the concrete experiences of peers in designing and implementing policies, programs, initiatives intended to advance fiscal transparency, to fulfill the right of citizens to know what government is doing with their money, and to participate in the debates, deliberations, and decisions on how tax money is raised and spent. I am Tania Sanchez with the Gifts Coordination Team, and today we are very honored to have two brilliant and committed guests to discuss and reflect on one of those policies, tools that is ever increasingly becoming an indispensable ingredient to promote the engagement of citizens in the budget deliberations. We're talking about building strong budget open data policies. We have Aura Martínez with the Mexican Secretariat of the Treasury and Public Credit, who will be sharing their experiences and what they have learned in structuring a open budget data policy. And she will be also referring to a webinar, a tutorial that was co-produced with GIFT, where in its step-by-step the ingredients and how to think about a policy that is targeted and that is monitored throughout its implementation. She will be unpacking this tutorial, commenting on it. And then we have another one of GIFT's stewards, Fabrizio Scrollini from the Latin American Open Data Initiative, to comment and to also provide us some clues and keys on how is it that we need to think about this open budget data policy. Without further ado, I am handing the mic to Aura, and thank you very much. Just a short comment, how we will be structuring the following 40-45 minutes. We will have Aura with a 15-17-minute presentation, and then we'll hand it on to Fabrizio. And please, if you have questions, comments, please do note them on the chat that you can see in your window there, and we will be collecting your questions to present them to Aura and Fabrizio. And as usual, please do keep your mics off. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, GIFT, Tania, and all the GIFT team for the chance to speak today about how to build an open data policy for budget transparency. As she said, I'm Aura Martínez from Mexico Ministry of Finance, in charge of the Open Budget Portal. And I'm gonna talk a little bit about how to build a bridge, the bridge of an open data budget policy. So we're gonna structure our presentation around that idea, that little metaphor. So for us, the promised land is actionable budget data transparency policy. What does this mean? We want to go there because the data opening process contributes to a successful budget transparency policy. So we always want to keep in mind that while budget transparency policy is a tool, it's a tool to go somewhere. And also that goes along for open data. And we have a lot of discussions around here. So we have the opening process, we have the different definitions about public versus open data. We have also the international standards, but it's a little, for us, it's the whole bridge from going to public data, public information, to public value on the one on our left to the one on our right. So from the Mexico's experience, we have some tips and tricks, as we like to say it. And how do we arrive to this promised land, the actionable data? We like to say that we built a bridge based on what citizens need. So as Tania said in the open data tutorial that we built alongside GIFT, we have to structure and start by listening to the demand. That means identifying people and organization interest and consider what others have done. How did we do it here in Mexico? We built on experiences of mostly civil society organizations, such as hackathons and data expeditions. We did public consultations or tests, let's say, and we talked also with researchers and civil society investigation centers, universities, etc. So on these images, you can see us participated in some hackathons on open data, reaching out to the data communities alongside a report from an organization built around our data, and also open consultation about how to rebuild our citizens' budget. All of these are just examples of how to listen to the people's direct needs. Also, when publishing open data, what we've realized that there's different levels of data openness. So do we have already your information in a JSON, in a CSV file, in an Excel file, in an APA if we are very, very lucky? Well, if we already know this, we need to have a structured route to follow, and the actions to perform on opening data mostly will depend on the origin. Is it new information? Who has it? Subnational governments, maybe our own Ministry of Finance systems? So from all these open questions, let's say, I want to go to return to the bridge metaphor. What do we want to build here? What kind of bridge we want to build, the bridge being our open data policy? We need to think about structure. We need to verify national or international standards. How do we structure information? We want to think about our materials of our bridge. So as we were saying, what's the source of our data and what's the format? Is it? And we need to think about also something very important. Who can go through this bridge? That means free versus toll. And for that to be for a bridge to be really open, we need to think about license that allows both its commercial and non-commercial use without restrictions. In that sense, the consolidation of a budget transparency policy would help people to get on the bridge. And for that, we need another couple of things that we need to think about. That's the quality of data, to avoid confusing information. As budgetary experts, we might think that the information is very clear, but we need to keep in mind that the information, this bridge that we are building, is not for us to cross alone. It's for everyone else. So we need to think about that and avoid confusing terms. And also, we need to present our information in an orderly and quality assured way. We also need to keep thinking about maintenance. So in order for our bridge not to fall, we need to think about updating the information, have to periodically checks on it, and think about our technological infrastructure. Think about having staff, both in the technological and technical issues. And also we need to think about communication and visualization trends. We also want to keep stress on it's important to make it usable. So it is hard to promote the use of an interesting data as it is hard to cross a bridge that we don't know how to get. So it's important to know, do people know where the bridge leads to? Do they even want to go there? So in order to make the data actionable, we need to still think about the users then again. We would like to say that there is no single way to build this bridge, but a very important way, after thinking about the issues I just mentioned, such as tech issues, structure, thinking about international standards, etc., is to always keep thinking about to give context to, link, and visualize the data in order to unleash the impact in the daily life of people. For that, in Mexico's experience, we've used maps. We've find this tip very useful since people already know what's happening around them. They might not know where the money comes from, but they do know what's happening in their communities, and that's what they're most interested about. And we also think that budget information, while it's very usable, many times cannot be actionable if not linked with other information. So another tip from our experience is to link it with other information, such as performance information. That means indicators, let's say how many books how many hospitals. That's more on the area of public infrastructure, which leads you directly again to maps, but also with information of international initiatives that might seem complementary, and indeed is when you have it linked, such as the open contracting information that takes us all through the contracting cycle, and as well as the extractive industries information, which in Mexico means mainly mining and oil. So all this information, while is linked, and for us as experts in budget might be very obvious to see how to link it while in our ministries, for the user that is not always obvious, and maybe as publishers it's not obvious as well. So it is important to think about which are important links, and this is just a few as an example, as they are international initiatives that have a lot of tools and organizations as helpful as gifts to accompany the process of implementing. So actionable data. This is something that we cannot stress enough. Actionable data means that it is ready to use. So maybe the open data initiatives in budget transparency in some countries are more advanced than in others. But is that data being used? Is not always only about thinking about linking the information, making visualization for the information, but also telling people how to use it. Maybe they can see it, they can see the link with other issues they like to explore, but they cannot use it. They don't have the tools. So in that sense, Mexico's Ministry of Finance partnered with GIFT were recently to create the open data tutorials, but you will find a lot of the information I just mentioned very in depth. They are a series of videos. Some key element about them is that they are told by not necessarily academic experts, but rather people that are in charge of doing this on a daily basis. People like you that would be opening the information and the tips and tricks they have used. This open data tutorial is meant to have publishers use open data, but it's also useful for civil society organizations that might want to use the information, or that might want to encourage the opening of more information, and they might find a civil servant that is very interested in doing this, but doesn't have the tools. It's not part of their daily job. We also created massive open online courses here in Mexico to have alongside civil society organizations such as Social TIC. For those in Latin America, they might know what this means. For those not, it's a leading civil society organization focused on data, openness, and security. We built this massive open online course with mainly basic tools of Excel, but also basic information on economy, how the state works, how the budget works, and then how to engage with the budget through the data, through the open information that we hold in the Fiscal Transparency Portal. Also, we've been taking another initiative, such as take the data, the open data to the street, which means also another way of making an actionable data out of budget information. This last year, alongside GIFT as well and other organizations, we basically ask people that report to us through social media what information they've seen on our open databases on public infrastructure, and what are they looking at, and how does this information actually looks in their communities. So rather, this is just another activity that we have a lot of people that are non-specialists in data, neither specialists in budget, engaging with the information through a little bit of a push through this activity, so they can realize how it's actionable. They can actually have an open data rally every day if they want to, but we just encourage this happened for the International Open Data Day. As I said in the last year, we had this initiative partner up with GIFT. We get feedback from the information, and with this feedback, this is another phase of the rally. It is not only useful to make people understand how data is actionable, but it's also a good tool to get feedback on the information we have, on how it is displayed in our platforms, and how it's actually actionable. As I was saying, is maybe we are making a mistake in the points of saying in the presentation. Maybe we're making information confusing. Maybe we're not making the best visualization. So these kind of exercises makes us aware of these flaws. And this slide brings me to the other one. This is not an isolated task. It's a never-ending process of feedback and improvement. And so how do we keep, other than events such as the rally, how do we gather the valuable information about how people use our data? We do it through social media, through basically statistics, gather through it through Google Analytics as well. So we know how many users are in our platforms, which platforms do they prefer, which platforms do they spend more time in, and maybe which ones they don't spend time in or they don't even click on. So just to conclude and be respectful of the time, I'd like to have a couple of conclusions. So we want to say that we always want to regard open data initiatives as a facilitator of information for other publishers, which are an important public, but also for decision makers. And we would like to highlight two moments of the opening process, which is coming back to the bridge metaphor, the structure, so the technological and structure matters of the opening process, whilst it being systems in the Ministry of Finance or maybe international standards. And also, and the second one would be the feedback and impact assessment, so the usage of the information. These are two key elements to always keep in mind in order to build a strong bridge, a strong budget open data policy. And well, with that, I'd like to end where I started. We want to keep our goal clear from the very beginning and clear to all the actors engaged in the policy. The goal is to have actionable budget transparency policy, and for that, open data is a great tool. And as long as you keep this goal in mind. And I want to also end my presentation by encouraging everyone to build this bridge. It's it does lead to the promised land, and it's very a joyful experience. And I also want to thank Gift for joining us and also has building this bridge with us in Mexico for a lot of years now, and invite everyone to join the tutorials. They are a very useful tool to build this bridge. And with that, I'll shut up and let Tania and Fabrizio take the mic.
Thank you, Aura, for this very clear and inspiring presentation. I think I won't comment long on this, but I thought the usage of the image of a bridge is very clarifying, and I really liked the very positive tone in which you ended the presentation. Let's build a bridge. So let's invite Fabrizio to comment on how we can help build this bridge.
Hello. So, hi, my name is, thank you very much for inviting me, Tania, and colleagues from GIFT. My name is Fabrizio Scrollini, and I coordinate the Latin American Open Data Initiative, or Iniciativa Latinoamericana por los Datos Abiertos. And I see we have many colleagues today from Latin America here as well, from Chile, from Argentina, but also, I guess, from Africa. I'm seeing Charlie here, and I don't know where Anne is from. Where are you from, Anne? I don't know if Nigeria and Cameroon. Yes, that's correct. And so, welcome everyone. So I just wanted to pick on a few of our points to the benefit of our colleagues here that are working in this field. So the first point I would like to raise, so this idea of the bridge, I think is very important. And Aura in one of her slides showed basically like three organizations, but also like three technical standards, which is the budget standard for open data that GIFT actually enables and helps countries to implement, the open contracting standard, and also the extractives industry standard. And data standards are not that complex, actually, are a way of structuring information, but also a way to foster cooperation among parties. And as you will see, the fact that you need to make available this data, but also to work with this data, help the standardization process and the other way around, because you are standardizing data, you are also defining concepts, and you're actually getting to see and design processes that just were not present or were not available or were not sought before. And this enables cooperation among several parties in the public administration mostly, but also outside public administration. So that's the first point I would like to raise, which is yes, standards and particularly data is a technical issue. The design of a standard is a technical issue, and the implementation is potentially a technical issue, but also a way of engaging and breaking silos across the data infrastructure that a public administration has, and that this provides a lot of challenges, and I'm pretty sure Aura could also share stories about that. But in our experience here from ILDA, we actually explored this with the Uruguayan public administration a couple of years ago, trying to understand what kind of silos the organization, the state basically was facing. And one of the crucial things we actually learned is that even there's at least 18 organizations that have to deal um, with budget data, and they are unable to share information, and they depend on the same information, which for us was kind of groundbreaking, or well, not groundbreaking, actually mind blogging. It's like, oh, hang on, how actually are you doing your job? And most of them are actually, using PDFs or actually using paper, or just, giving a call to a colleague to see whether, a number, a figure actually makes sense or not. So this is actually the current status in many countries. The lack of standardization of data leads to very poor practices in the public sector when you essentially deal with budget data. That's problematic for many reasons, but usually for people working on it. I think the second point, so yes, the idea of bridges is very important. Standards are able to build those bridges in a technical sense, but also in a more, if you want, institutional sense, bringing together all these organizations that are sharing data and need this data. Then the other point I think was important to reflect on is that while you are building this, do consider, the politics of it. Like, all these organizations and institutions might not necessarily be aligned in order to cooperate. And so the work on the standard provides an opportunity as long as there is some sort of alignment for these institutions, and that's usually the hard part. But also, there are ways in which this could be done, which I guess this goes to our points of actionable data, which is mostly around this idea that because someone is using this data, because someone is actually either visualizing the data or using it for work purposes, we have demand, and as a result, people no longer can ignore the publication of data. I guess budget data has. So what we discover in this workshop and is that while we could create tools to visualize, and I think these are increasingly important in order to democratize the knowledge about the budget. So all this effort to publish and standardize data has to deliver at some point, and it can deliver to a particular audience, such as international institutions like the World Bank, IMF, and so on. And yes, this is important because these are institutions that rely on this information, and they play a role in governance in several countries. But also, they can deliver a lot of knowledge to the citizenry, and crucially to businesses and other stakeholders across the country that actually also need this information, either to, prepare to understand the economic climate as a country, or potentially to be in public contracts, or potentially to evaluate the policies that the government is carrying forward. And so as a result, I will say that understanding those stakeholders and delivering products that actually make sense for them, it's kind of the hard part of this work. And it's a bit like when the closest analogy that I have for this is when you think about this as, um, uh, when you are in an ice cream factory, basically, and you take great care of, selecting the ingredients, and you take great care of, getting the best people to create the ice cream, and the best professionals, and the best style, and you get this Italian chef to, I don't know, get the best formula, and then when you get at the last mile, you actually don't deliver the ice cream in a nice presentation that people actually want to eat. And this is, you know, the hard part for this field and for other fields as well. And I think there's a lot of things that we can do in order to help that happening. And we have here the colleagues of Observatorio del Gasto Fiscal in Chile, where they are trying hard to do that, right? Like they are either delivering visualizations, they are testing with different approaches to engage several audiences with data. A natural constituency for these are businesses and consultancies around, around government. I think it's important to engage them because they are users, and usually they are silent users of this data. So you know, and that's not great because we need users to speak up in order to sustain the data publication, in order to advocate for the value of this data for ministers. I mean, our experience here for ministers and other people that were involved in the publication of data, they were not that clear that this was very helpful initially, except, in terms of, yes, this is helpful to have your own dashboard inside a ministry or several ministries, but why would I share this? And I guess, like, to get these people being very vocal about this also helps to justify the release of data. So basically, and yes, we still need to work a lot to understand these contingencies. In Latin America, several governments have built um, also websites, and civil society also did that. I think there's an opportunity there for co-production of public services, depending on the context of each country. But I think there's much, learning that through innovation that, occasionally will happen at the civil society level. We might get as well governments to improve the way they show data and they use data. And those will be my comments. Thank you very much for inviting me, and happy to chat and discuss later.
Thank you, Fabrizio. Oops, too close. So thank you very much. We now can take your questions. Aura and Fabrizio will be very happy to take your questions. We have here the Observatorio is pointing out that their website for all the interested. They're thanking the mention. While we wait for your questions, I will just try to summarize some of the key points of the presentations. And Aura's presentation, I think, was very clear in setting out the steps and laying out the roadmap that I think can be useful independent of the starting point of any government or country wishing to implement and design the strong budget policy. Aura is the Mexican experience is starts with I think Aura laid it out in maybe 4 or 5 general steps. Each one has specific details, but they start with listening to the demand, and they have pointed out 2 specific examples of how to listen to demand. Then going back to your own data and decide the level of openness depending on the origin and the source and the format. There you stop and think about the quality of data, what you will be needing to do to maintain your data, your policy. And that's the moment where in this roadmap you're thinking about the resources that you will need. And then the point of making this data interesting, she gives a very useful set of recommendations how to make this data interesting. As Fabrizio was, and now we use the image of Fabrizio's ice cream, how to make it delicious and appealing and have people eat it before it melts. But so I think both talk about bridging building bridges, and the complement of Fabrizio's vision in you're not only building bridges outside the public administration with users, but very importantly, setting up a budget open data policy or initiative within a government leads to breaking silos and building bridges within the public administration. And this is only to improve practices within the public administration. Then also both talk about the importance of getting feedback, of constantly monitoring who's using this data, what kind of data they're finding useful, and from there closing the cycle to improving your own offering of open data. With that very general and simple description, I would ask both of you, how does the starting point of a government condition these steps? What are the main challenges depending on the starting point? If you have a country where you already have some of your data pretty well organized, maybe complying with some of the standards that Fabrizio was mentioning, what are the challenges depending on the starting point? And I'll start capturing your other questions here. Fabrizio or Aura?
Oh. Hello. So I would say that the common challenge is the one of use. So the one that implies that information has to be used. So you can be, I would encourage any country, regardless of their starting point, to engage with civil society organizations and with the public directly. This can be done, for example, through the rally with as a tool as simple as a CSV with all, or an Excel file with the projects. So I would encourage any country, regardless of the maturity of their data, to engage with citizens. This, for example, through the rally and through the invitation recently sent by Gift, you can do it through an Excel file that has all the projects that you want people to attend and verify, and you don't need a very big platform or visualization or even the compliance with a standard. You just need the data, and you just need to have it open and make a communication effort so people engage with the information. So the main goal has a lot of challenges, but all of them are seen throughout the cycle of the maturity of the data. But also, and going more for the differences that rather than the common challenges, if you are starting your open data policy, I would say that you have to go to, you have a training challenge and maybe a learning curve that you have to engage. That can be, there's a lot of tools that international organizations have, so that's a plus, that maybe countries that started before didn't have the tools from outside that they can use for this their civil servants. And now we do have tools such as the tutorial, but as many others. But there's also a political will that we have to be as a starting point for having a lot of civil servants trained about these topics. Also, there's the matter of the challenge of the technological issues that you might encounter in case this is the first data that you are opening. I would encourage countries to find out which data is already systematized or standardized in a way that is useful for the ministry. As Fabrizio said, the main user or the first user of the information are the civil servants, and many times they have to call a colleague just to ask them if the information they are gathering from somewhere is correct. So if you already have this data, that'll be the first in line to use. And in case this is the first time you are open, you are in a stage of your opening cycle that you already have some data, but you are not sure if it's standardized enough. And there's the challenge of tech. So I'll be the first step I'll take is to avoid the tech issue and go first for the information that is easiest to reach within our tech capabilities for each country. And for countries that are more advanced in their opening of budget information, I'll say the linking challenge is the one that is more at hand. So how to link the information in a way that is useful, maybe performance information, contracting information, and industry specific information. So that'll be another challenge that as well as it can be seen in any stage, I think more advanced countries will have it more at hand as a challenge. And I also want to say that I really enjoyed Fabrizio's metaphor of the ice cream.
Yes, especially on a warm day. Aura, maybe you pointed out to the challenge of training government officials, and we can take this question which builds on that. How much time, resources are needed to train public servants in building that bridge and addressing the public? I guess it varies a lot, but maybe on the experience in Mexico?
Well, as you said, it can vary a lot. I would say that it also depends on the initial capacities of the civil servants. So as we say in the tutorial, in one of the episodes, it is very important to build that the team that is building the fiscal transparency policy is a team that has a lot of capabilities on budget knowledge, as well as how to have a team with tech specialists. So this is just like the small team that would lead the larger team of civil servants that will engage in these efforts. And it also will depend on, for example, we were talking a lot about tutorials and massive open online courses and tools like this. This is, for example, we recently changed our the system where the national governments give information to the Ministry of Finance, and then this information we make public through maps. So this recent change of information could have taken, for example, a year or two in capacity building if it was at least a couple of months if it was in-person capacity building. But as we made it mainly through tutorials, through online platforms, and through online communication, as well as telephone follow-up, it took only a couple of weeks for the people to be engaged in this system, as well as we had we had previous engagement with these civil servants. So I guess it also depends. Well, it also has to do with a lot of engagement through the process, and it would depend on the specifics of the information that you want to open. But I'll say it's always useful to, as long as it is possible, to engage on online tools and make them available as early in the process as possible.
Yes, and just to follow up on that, Aura, I think in the case of Mexico also, you have been able to build on previous initiatives and previous engagements with public servants or officials, or using online tools. So I guess this also the starting point sometimes is not just starting with your open data policy, but previous initiatives where you have trained officials in other matters can also be, you can use those, let's say, avenues that have previously been built.
Exactly. This is not about reinventing the wheel. It's more about using what is already there. And also many times if you talk about transparency or openness, these are concepts that not many civil servants are aware of, but they are aware of what the budget cycle is, and they are also, and it's very important to think about civil servants not only as civil servants but also as people. So while they might be aware of the budget cycle and not about what openness or transparency means, they are aware of what their needs are as people are and what information they would like to be available for them if they were not wearing the civil servant hat and wearing a citizen hat, many times the angry citizen hat. So this is also very important to keep in mind. While the concepts might not be common ground for everyone, there is common ground on building a bridge on listening to a demand of citizenry and of people.
Right. Thank you, Aura. We also in the chat we have there the reference to the link to the tutorial and also the link to the Uruguay website that Fabrizio was mentioning. Fabrizio, would you like to add anything to this topic or to any other issue that has been raised?
I think that just to briefly follow on Aura's point, I think it's important to consider the capacity of public servants to fully develop an engagement agenda with the public. I think there usually there are several elements that public servants need to address. One of them, yes, is a basic understanding of what open data means. That is increasingly there, but for instance, in our experience in Costa Rica and other countries, what we found out is that yes, it's there, but only in a few units. So as a result, it's important to have a more spread basic knowledge of what are we talking about when we're talking open data. The other element or skill that public servants may need to develop is being more able to engage either through social media or through more participatory channels to actually get the feedback straight from the audience to the people. And I think we don't get to see much of that at the moment. I mean, depending on a few, if you have examples here and there. And in this particular area, I think that what makes sense is actually get workshops and get people together to co-create either services or to co-create ways of visualizing the data. If it's going to be used, I think it's going to need user involvement, and those skills are usually not there. And sometimes because people were not trained, and sometimes because there's a traditional resistance of the public service to engage with users and to engage with citizenry, which is totally understandable. And sometimes, the dialogue starts by people demanding data and filling an field of information request for your database or for your papers. That's a start of a dialogue, but it can certainly move forward in a different and more constructive way. Obviously, I'm assuming here a very basic element that is political will and also goodwill on the parties to create better services or products. And finally, I think that data-wise, there's also an element there to find the right teams, which is usually a combination of technical, communication, and management skills to drive this project forwards. And we have some evidence of how to deliver that, but at the moment it's still very, very patchy, I will say. We don't have all the evidence. We would like to tell you how to run this project, but we have teams that have successfully delivered on that, and we learn from them. Yep, and those will be the remarks I will have to provide. Did you manage to hear all of that?
Yes, fantastic. Now, just the end was a little bit noisy, and I couldn't quite hear if you were done. But thank you. Yes, this is I think another issue that needs to be discussed, and I think we have great experiences in the community and specifically with our stewards to think about what are the kind of capacities or skills that we need to build in the public administration, in the civil servants. And so you close by saying, yes, we need to build this basic common ground understanding of what open data is, but also this ability to engage with the audience, get feedback in a way, as you mentioned, defying the natural resistance of the public administration people to do this. And I guess I take it as an offering that you have experiences and examples that we can explore on how to co-create these policies and do it in a constructive way. And the time's up. If you have any 1 minute more conclusions to add, we can take them, Aura and Fabrizio, or we can finish here. I guess I can't. I don't know if you want to add anything, Aura.
All good. Yeah, thank you very much, Tania, Fabrizio, and everyone that joined. So happy to hear from the Observatorio and as well from the people in Cameroon and from Dr. Anne as well.
Great, thank you, Aura. And Fabrizio?
Thank you very much. And as I was actually mentioning in the chat, ice cream is the right answer for most of the questions.
Okay, thank you so much. Thank you everyone for joining. Fabrizio, Aura, for sharing what you have learned along this way, and for sure we will continue this conversation. And this webinar session will be posted in GIFT's website. We will also make a mention in the newsletter, and we'll be providing the links that you were offering here in the chat for everyone to consult. Thank you very much and see you in our next Wednesday webinar.